Hello everybody, it's the Historical Gamer once again, and today we're returning to our War in the Pacific series against XTRG. This is a play-by-email series in which we're playing as the Allies and XTRG is playing as the Axis, or as the Japanese. In our last episode, the Japanese began landings in the South Pacific on Tulagi near Guadalcanal and also near Shortland. We've also detected the fact that the Japanese aircraft carriers have been sighted in the South Pacific, and we've begun plans to counter this with a carrier raid of our own, moving in toward either Kwajalein or Wake Island, depending on how situations dictate. With that being said, the objective of those raids is to hurt the Japanese without exposing our carriers to enemy carriers, given we know that the Japanese carriers are located somewhere else, or at least our intel suggests they're located somewhere else. And frankly, we've spotted that same task force each of the last 2 days. In each of the last 2 days, it has been identified to have carriers. So presumably, it's pretty good. Recon. Meanwhile, you can see here the Japanese are attempting to depth charge an S-36, but they're depth charging above the sub, so that's good. That's one of those little-known factoids about World War II in the Pacific, is the Japanese had bad intelligence about the capabilities of American aircraft carriers, and they often thought that the American, or not aircraft carriers, sorry, about American submarines, and they often thought that American submarines could not dive as deep as they could. Meanwhile, there's a Japanese sub attacked a troop transport near Nomaya, but the troop transport actually beat the Japanese submarine off with surface gunfire. You could see the Japanese decided to submerge and disengage as a result of damage that they suffered. Meanwhile, the submarine Sturgeon has just launched some torpedoes against a Japanese light cruiser near Bataan Island, but that apparently didn't do anything. The torpedoes missed. So quite a sub-heavy early morning phase, I guess you will say, before the sun comes up phase, although I will say there wasn't really much in the way of actual explosions or targets hit. There was a lot of activity that was occurring nonetheless. So we're moving into the daylight phase. We have task forces refueling due to being low on fuel. We have the President Coolidge, a troop transport at Nomaya, not taking any damage from an enemy sub. Meanwhile, a cargo ship here off the coast of Suva, which I believe was returning to New Zealand after having unloaded its cargo at Suva, is torpedoed by a Japanese sub and sunk. The President Coolidge, by the way, has ducked a lot of Japanese torpedoes, so she appears to be a little bit of a lucky ship so far. We'll see how long that luck holds, especially if the Japanese carriers come around. Okay, a bunch of recon going on near Pearl. We're detecting various Japanese submarines. Fortunately, I think all these submarines are not in a position to be able to detect our carriers, which should be moving kind of in between the subs. And as long as these aren't the Japanese subs with the recon aircraft on them. Meanwhile, Japanese continue to sweep over Singapore. No bombers yet in sight. Singapore's airfield is back to operating at 100% with no damage, and our fighter wings there are rapidly recovering. We may need to consider putting some cap up this turn, because presumably he's going to return to bombing Singapore somewhat soon. You can see here he's bombing on the island of Sumatra here in the north near Medan, so maybe he'll consent to start bombing Singapore again soon, although we really did ravage his bombers, shooting down more than 100 Sallies, I believe it was. So his bomber formations are not in good shape, but I think we're going to have around 80 or 90 ready fighter aircraft, so even that might be enough to challenge 30 or 40 enemy Zeros and give him a little bit of a bloody nose. I'd rather wait for Japanese bombers. The problem is I'll kind of have to guess, when he's going to start bombing again. I wonder if he starts bombing again, if he'll actually expose his naval bombers, the Bettys and the Nells, to potential losses. That would be really nice if we could get some free shots in on them. Okay, a lot more recon. Not a lot actually happening this turn, so far anyway, other than those early submarine activities. I think we're going to go ahead and fast forward a little bit. You can see some bombing going on here in China. So we'll go ahead and fast forward through that. They're bombing some ground forces there. But not central. I mean, it's an important city, but it's probably going to fall to the Japanese in the next day or two anyway. Oh, by the way, fun fact, it is New Year's Eve right now, so All of the actions occurring right now are on New Year's Eve. Meanwhile, there's a cargo ship that's being attacked by Japanese submarines off the coast of Pago Pago. I believe she was unloading cargo, too. And a Japanese sub is hitting troop transports off the island of New Zealand. Or the islands of New Zealand. The nation of New Zealand. You can see here they're attacking with guns. They put 2 torpedoes and 6 shell hits on her. She'll probably sink. I could have sworn we had surface vessels escorting those convoys. Another troop transport sunk. Japanese submarines have been far more effective than my own, and that's somewhat to be expected because of the torpedo problems for our subs, but I also think XTRG is just better than me at utilizing them. I've had very ineffective anti-submarine warfare tactics. I may have to look into them a little bit. Meanwhile, we're already into the land combat phase here, so it doesn't look like there's a lot going on from a naval phase this turn, interestingly. Japanese are attacking to the east of Ichang here. We've got 2 corps. He's attacking these forces here. The Japanese lost about 1,000 men. We lost about 256 men just to the east of Ichang. So we got the better of them in that one. Lost more destroyed than us, too. Meanwhile, there's a deliberate attack at Wuchow. Over here. He'll probably win this one. He's got 2 elements of a division and some artillery support. We just have 1 reasonably strong provisional corps and several other battered units. Yep. Wuchow falls, and so those Chinese troops are going to be driven back toward the interior. Some of them actually surrendered here. That's unfortunate. So we lost about 6,000 men, mainly presumably from the surrendered unit, 3 units retreating, and 6,000 soldiers versus 300. Japanese shock attack at Cabantu on the Philippines, just to the east of Clark Field. The Japanese are closing the noose in and around Clark Field. Meanwhile, the 22nd Japanese Infantry Division has arrived at Wuchow, and we actually issued the order to attack because I thought I might have a chance to get local superiority over this Japanese division. There were more forces spotted coming from the north, but they hadn't arrived yet. It doesn't look like they have arrived yet either, so we may have an isolated chance at doing some damage to a Japanese division in China, which is always useful. We got 2-to-1 odds. We drove the Japanese forces back. We inflicted almost 4,000 casualties. We destroyed 101 Japanese infantry units, 102 non-combat units, 5 engineers, 23 guns, 9 of them destroyed, 12 vehicles, 6 of them destroyed, drove that division back. We did lose about 1,600 men, quite a few destroyed units, but honestly, the damage we did to that division, this city's going to fall. Wuchow's going to fall, and if he has 2 more divisions on the way, it's going to fall quickly. But the fact that we were able to probably effectively knock out at least half the offensive firepower and a considerable number of destroyed squads against the Japanese is a lot more success than we would have had if we stayed pat and didn't attack. Meanwhile, Tulagi here in the Solomons, that'll fall. We didn't have any troops there. And Shortlands also in the Solomon Sea and the Solomon Island chains will also fall to the Japanese. Those are both potential reasonably good bases for the Japanese to extend their sort of influence south, but they're not currently built up to any degree. So if the Japanese were to try and base units out of there, naval units are going to take a long time before they can base anything out of there, and long-range bombers they probably won't be able to base out of there anytime soon. Shortlands specifically can have a really good airfield, but it's going to take time and considerable engineer units being deployed there for him to be able to do that. But it looks like the turn's over with not a lot else happening, so I'm going to go ahead and step out before it kicks me out of the game, and we'll go ahead and pick you guys back up once I'm into the turn. All right, we're back into War in the Pacific here. We've just concluded the replay for December 31st. It is now January 1st of 1942. We're into I guess you could say the second year of the war, but really it's the second month of the war after quite some time. And the first thing that I want to call out here is while the Japanese haven't actually made a move on New Caledonia yet, or Espiritu Santo, we can see here there's a task force up here that's moving southwest. It's a carrier task force, and frankly, it's a little bit too close for comfort to the Fiji line. I have a lot of really inefficient processes going on right now because all these ports in here are way too small to be handling the amount of shipping that's coming in. But about the only one that's reasonably built out is the port at Suva. It's a level 3 port. Everything else is pretty much level 1. Nomaya is level 2 as well. And the Fiji line in here is going to have to kind of be at least temporarily evacuated from a shipping perspective, because this is the Kiributai, and it is heading southwest, which means it's heading in this direction. It could be angled in on Espiritu Santo, but there's nothing there for him to bomb. So if his air groups have anti-shipping orders, you know, they're going to be in range. Remember, the Zero and the Japanese bombers have pretty long range. So they're going to be in range of our shipping here if they move toward Espiritu Santo. They might already be... Probably not, but they move 1 or 2 hexes and they'll be in range. So what we're going to do is we're going to pull all 3 of these task force at Comac out, who have an Indian brigade that they're landing. Actually, sorry, we're going to pull 1 of the 3 out. So we're going to pull out the troop transport Tilawa, who still has elements of that brigade on board. We're going to pull out the Lancashire, who has still elements of that brigade on board. And we're going to leave the Jalarajarin, mainly because it's small enough to dock at this small port, and it has the most supplies on board. It's also, I think, the least valuable of the ships when it comes to victory value. This one's worth 1 more, and the Lancashire is worth 7 more. So yeah, it's the least valuable at 11 victory points, and frankly, it has the most supply, which is the main reason I want to leave it there, is to kind of allow it to unload. In addition to that, we're also going to be pulling out the ships that are located near Nomaya. So we have the... What ships are over here? The Thefonano Livananos, or however you pronounce that, which is going to be returned... Well, actually, no, we still have it at Nomaya. Right, because she's docked. So we're going to have her finish unloading the 4th Australian Light Anti-Aircraft Battery. It's already unloaded all of its supply. So that should be concluded. And then the President Coolidge, Duntron, and Narina are all going to move out at flank speed back to Brisbane. There's still elements of the 5th Royal Australian Coastal Defence Battery. Actually, quite a few guns here still on board, 6 of them. But none of these ships are small enough to dock. Well, specifically the Coolidge isn't small enough to dock at Nomaya, and I don't want those guns sunk at sea. So we're going to move them all back at flank speed away from Nomaya. Meanwhile, we have some ships. Actually, we should set these guys waypoint a little bit further south. We still are sending some ships to Nadi because, as far as we can tell, he's not moving on Nadi itself. So we'll divert these guys a little bit further south, and they'll continue moving on Nadi. Meanwhile, this group is bringing in some additional supplies and additional elements of the 5th Australian Coastal Artillery. She's small enough to dock, but that's the question, is like, do I want to risk it? There's 7 6-inch guns. They'd be invaluable if we could get them ashore. But I don't know what, if any, will actually come ashore before he lights them up with air raids. Is it worth the risk? They can get there before the sun rises, just barely, so they may get 1 or 2 ashore, but I think I'm going to have to pull it out. I just, in the event that he actually makes a lunge for Nomaya, and it's not assured, I mean, he may just be pounding Espiritu Santo, but again, there's nothing there to bomb. So I think we'll actually have these guys fall back. And I think I'm going to sort of realign my priorities for these ships, where I'm going to try and actually move at flank speed just in case. I think I'm going to realign my priorities and try and remake the 5th Australian in the event that we have a few more turns before he actually lands. Then we may kind of turn these guys around. But at least for now, we're going to pull back with these ships. The cruiser series is moving back as well. And then at Nadi, we're kind of restructuring some of this stuff going on here. So there's a lot of submarine activity around Nadi. The port is too small to protect us from submarine activity. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to leave some ships here that are going to continue unloading, like the Hugo Scott and the Iron Chieftain, which are unloading primarily supplies. The Queen Elizabeth is just too frickin' big and is unloading so flippin' slow. Frickin' and flippin', yeah. Because she's 48,000 tons. But I also really don't want her to get sunk by a Japanese submarine. So we're going to move her to Suva and see if we can get any better unloading rate there, given the port size is bigger and should be shielded from submarine activity in the anchorage at least. Additionally, we've got other ships that are kind of staying around Suva. So we're not evacuating the ships at Suva, but we are evacuating the ships near New Caledonia. If he was moving southeast, we'd probably be evacuating, but since he's moving southwest, I think Fiji is safe for now. Meanwhile, we have seen several turns of submarines around Pago Pago, so I've restructured the ships here to have destroyer escorts for each, and we've also set up one anti-submarine task force at Pago Pago, hopefully to try and get a hold of his subs that are down there. Meanwhile, various ships moving in and out of Australia, most moving in. These guys are moving with supplies to Nomaya. How big are any of these ships? Can any of these guys dock? 4,200, 4,200. So both these guys should be able to dock at either Nomaya or Comac. There's still a couple of turns away, so let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, they'll still be a safe distance at the end of today, I think. They only do that double that, right? I think that's the case. So they should be safe, and we can kind of keep them at sea and figure out what our plan is for them afterwards. Meanwhile, this anti-submarine task force needs to head south to be off the coast of Sydney to get at these submarines that are operating there. Remain on station, max react 1, I guess, maybe 2. And then we've got some ships in Sydney's harbor as well. I think most of these guys are just returned, so we're going to go ahead and just disband these guys. There's no reason to keep them in the in these task forces in task force formations if we don't need to. So go ahead and disband those guys, which actually gives us quite a large fleet, over 30 ships at Sydney. Which again, if he tries to make like a deep lunge with the Kitty Butai, I can't really stop that, so we need to be mindful of that. Although it would be pretty foolish for him to do so. We've got more oil. Nope, these guys are not coming in with oil. I thought I had an oil task force that was coming in. Maybe not. We unloaded the 1 Indian Brigade at Port Moresby, so we have that brigade unloaded here. And we did, I believe, drop more supplies in there too. So not a ton of supplies, but about 6,000 supplies here. One other thing that I do want to call out this turn is that our fortifications at Bataan, our airfield at Bataan was expanded to a level 2, which is really good news for us because you can see here that the supply limit went up from like 36,000 to 53,000. So we have 61,000 supply at Bataan right now, which means that 8,000 supply is subject to spoilage, but previously like 20,000 was subject to spoilage. So this should allow us to much more effectively defend Bataan, since we can cram at least 53,000 supply in here without any risk of spoilage damage. I'm going to stop expanding the airfield at this point because it's probably a waste of engineering resources that I'd rather be going toward expanding the fortifications to level 4. Meanwhile, Japanese forces have arrived at Clark Field. We're not going to attack them. It's a dark red, which I don't have any hard data to suggest that means it's a full division, but I think that means it's a full division. And if that is true, he's probably got 300 to 400 combat value. I don't have any American units at Clark Field, so I'd rather not launch a attack against them at this time. We're just going to kind of hunker down. He might be strong enough to drive us out of Clark Field. We'll see. But it is a level 2 fort, so hopefully the level 2 fort with the 600 assault value means that if he does attack, he'll be thrown back. Meanwhile, he's also sent a small force at Lingyang. I'm not sure how large, but we only have a small fraction of a battalion up here, so we'll have to see how that works out. In addition to that, we're also trying to pull back this fraction of the 45th Infantry Battalion. We've disbanded the damaged P-40s at Iba. We just, for whatever reason, couldn't use the supply mechanics to get enough supply there to replenish them. They were never going to get repaired, and I don't want these guys cut off here. It's been like 2 weeks where we've been trying to repair them to no effect. So I just decided to disband the squadron. They'll reform in about 3 months. Actually, no, I think it was 2 months in the States, I believe. And so we'll get the airmen back at least. And you can see here these troops are going to be moving into into Clark Field soon. Meanwhile, we're going to be launching another bombing raid on Mersing. I don't really have a lot that I can do against Mersing, I don't think. I could probably attack with these guys, but I don't have enough supply to attack multiple turns in a row. So for now, I'm just going to hold in place and kind of hope that he doesn't attack us, or if he does, actually maybe it'd be better if he attacks us, because I know I still am stronger than him. I don't think there's anything he can do about that, but we'll just kind of hold in place for now. I thought I had an artillery... Oh, sorry. I only have infantry units selected right now. I do also have an artillery battalion here, which we could decide to bombard, but that would kind of show our hand and let him know how many men we have. Also, it would use up the supply. So if I did want to attack, then it probably wouldn't have enough supply to support a bombardment the next turn. So we'll kind of hold those guys in place. And we'll just kind of launch a bombing raid with our aircraft in Singapore and whatnot against Mersing. Meanwhile, he hasn't launched any bombing raids on Singapore lately, so he still keeps flying cap. I see no reason to risk our fighters in a cap trap. So I am going to go ahead and launch those bombing raids on Mersing. I am going to use my pretty large fighter force as an escort formation. So we're going to use 22 P-40Bs, or the H-81A3s, as they're known, of the Flying Tigers, to run a fighter sweep over Mersing to try and catch any enemy fighter aircraft he might be covering the base with. And then we're going to launch the remaining fighters that we have, with the exception of the P-40Bs and one squadron of Es, as an escort for the actual bombing raids. So we're going to be having almost 70 aircraft in action this turn. We've got 85 fighters again, guys. So we've got a lot of fighters. A total of 101 fighters are in Singapore. 85 of them are ready. Our readiness is very high. The airbase's readiness is at 100%. There's no damage. So all of those are really positive things. We're also going to try and lay a minefield at Mersing in the event that he's going to continue to try and run supplies or additional troops in. We're going to send the Wilhelm de Zaan, which is a Dutch mine layer that has 45 Mark II mines, VH Mark II mines. And we're going to send them up to Mersing to try and strengthen the minefield there. There is actually a minefield at Mersing. It consists of 73 defensive mines, which isn't a very robust field, but 45 more mines will bring its strength a little bit more respectable. So if he keeps running ships in here, there's a risk that eventually one of them is going to hit a mine. We'll see if that's effective or not. I don't actually want to take the roundabout way. I would much rather just go direct. So we should change the routing here. Direct. There we go. So this means they'll just take the most direct route, which is right along the coast, which should be faster. Meanwhile, we did learn that the troops up here couldn't land at Pegu because there is no port. Pegu is inland. So we had some British brigades that were going to be arriving at Pegu, but we can't. We can't even send them to Rangoon because Rangoon's upriver, and the ships are too large to move up the river. There's a size limitation from a tonnage perspective on ships that can go into Rangoon. And several of those troop transports are too large to go to Rangoon, so we're sending them into India, so we'll bring in 2-3 fresh brigades of Redcoats to India. Meanwhile, in China, we're really not doing much. He did successfully take Wuchow last turn. Our troops here are disorganized, and we're hopefully going to have them fall back, but we can't issue orders to them while they're disorganized. So the intent would be to fall back to this rail line up here, where we're going to set up a new defensive line a little bit further into China. Meanwhile, he's probably going to retake Xinyang this turn pretty quickly, I imagine, but every time he attacks and takes and attacks and takes, this base gets damaged and more damage and more damage, so hopefully it's a little bit of a drain of resources for him to try and fix it up. It also delays his drive in Nanyang if he eventually tries to do that. Meanwhile, we're about to pull out of Changchao, so he has flanked to the south. He's driven forces back on their supports, and so we are going to be moving all of these troops, the 2,200 assault value, up to Loyang, where they'll be in better position to avoid being flanked at sort of the head of this valley. We've got a bunch of submarines operating in and around Japan. He's sent out some anti-submarine task forces, so we're adjusting some submarine locations there and in north of the Philippines. The Prince of Wales actually has started taking some damage as she's kind of gotten out to open seas. She's up to 60 float damage. She's still making 6 knots, but the 60 float damage is a little bit concerning, so I have slowed her down to mission speed. Actually, I did that a couple of turns ago, but I don't know if I showed the fact that she's up to 60 float. She was as low as 56 maybe at one point, so it's not like she's rapidly increasing flooding, but she's got a long journey ahead of her still. So, it's going to be another week before she's even off the map, probably. And who knows if she's even going to make it. In more positive news, though, the Repulse has not suffered any additional damage, and they're getting relatively close. They're probably about 5 days out. About 5 days out from Cape Town, where she can start repairing rapidly. Speaking of ships needing to repair rapidly, our battleship fleet is still on the way to San Francisco, and they're making good progress. They're not moving super fast, but they're making good progress without really any increase in float damage. At about 11 knots, they're moving east and soon north towards San Francisco, where they can start repairing. We may sort of break the force up and send some to different ports like Los Angeles and San Diego to kind of split up their using of the repair shipyards, so that way not everything is in one port. The less tonnage you have in your shipyards, the more efficient the shipyards can be. The Yorktown, meanwhile, is on the way toward Pearl Harbor, so she is headed toward Pearl. She won't be in time for that carrier raid that we launched, but at least she's on the way, along with a light cruiser, the Phoenix, and a destroyer, the Bagley. And then we've got our 3 carriers at sea here to the southwest, southwest of Pearl Harbor. They're in the process of sort of feeling out if it would be a good idea to launch a carrier raid or not. I've been tempted with the idea of moving them down to Tarawa instead. Kwajalein just has a lot of air bases and a lot of bases all nearby, so they're going to be harder to detect. It'd be interesting as an idea to kind of swing in here toward Tarawa and then swing north toward Kwajalein, Rio Namar, and then Wake Island. Maybe it'd be an interesting idea if we ran in toward Tarawa, then ran north, and then hit Wake Island, and then swung east and hit Midway. It's sort of a great circular route before returning to Pearl. That would take a while. It would also take a lot of fuel. We do have tankers on the way to support such an idea, but it'd kind of be intriguing to hit Tarawa first and then retreat north all the while, because if all of his carriers really are down here, even if he sprints back, he doesn't have interior lines on us. It's pretty much the same distance for him and us. And if let's say we move in at regular speed to Tarawa, and then we sprint to Kwajalein, and then we sort of either after Kwajalein retreat back to Pearl or sprint to Wake, then we can have tankers meeting us all the way and ensure that we're staying in good fuel. Meanwhile, if he'd have any chance of catching us, he'd have to abandon his operations here in the south, sprint north, probably burn up most of his fuel in the effort, and I don't think it would be likely that he would catch us. That would be an incredibly bold gambit to do that. I'm not really sure if there's anything at Tarawa worth bombing. I know some of you in the chat have said you should bomb Tarawa. Well, right now, recon indicates it's only a level 1 port and a level 2 0 airfield. So there might not be any purpose of that. Ocean is a little bit better from port capacity, but even worse for air. And Nauru could be as well. So, I mean, we could interdict this whole southern Gilbert area before swinging north, I suppose, and kind of swing this way and around. I'm not sure. I'm just spitballing ideas. I haven't really made up my mind. All I know is the carriers are heading west, and this turn they should clear they should be very close to Johnston Island, and at that point we'll probably have to make some decisions on that. The other alternative is just going straight for Wake, which is much safer, but probably less lucrative. But I don't know. If his carriers are way south, I don't even know if he'd have any shipping at Kwajalein. It all depends on where his logistical hub is out of. If he's way down here, there's a very good likelihood he may just be pulling supplies from truck, which I think would be the smarter thing to do, is it's a much larger facility and further insulated. Although that would run the risk of all those convoys being within sort of detection range of our patrols out of Rabaul. So it really depends on sort of where the axis of his advance is. Is it Kwajalein, where we originally saw his carriers? Is it truck? Has he moved any shipping to Nauru, Ocean, Tarawa in any effort to have his logistics be a little bit closer to the actual operations? Because that's a long logistical train to be doing such a deep raid. I don't know the answer. We will find out, presumably. Well, we may not find out, but we should at least get a sense of what he's up to in the next turn with this carrier force still moving southwest and over 300 aircraft involved with them. That is definitely the Kido Butai in all its glory. Let's see. I don't have a lot else to talk about. We can take a look at the intelligence report here. If we look over here, the SIGINT doesn't really give us a lot of information this turn. We learned about, there's a tank regiment at Ilo Star in the Manilei Peninsula, some anti-aircraft at near Taiwan, some radio transmissions at Eparai, Wake Island, Camaran Bay, Chennai, and Nanking. Some engineers at Hankow in China. Heavy volume of radio traffic's detected at 108.95. Where is 108.95? 108.95. Well, it's... Oh, it's going to be like way the hell up here, isn't it? Is that Guam? No. $108.95. Okay, so maybe there's a convoy to the east of Guam of something. But, yeah, I don't see a lot of interesting information here in this particular report. Yokohama has some radio transmissions, 208.75, which would be even way further west. Yeah, not really much to look at there. Ops reporting. Queen Elizabeth was snooped by Japanese fighter bomber near Nadi. That's probably a submarine float plane, so it's a good thing we're probably moving her over to Suva, where she should be a little bit more safe. Not a lot over here. You know, aircraft reporting sightings, submarine sightings. Nothing really of note. Combat reports. We already kind of showed the combat results. Really a non-turn in terms of air losses. We lost 1 aircraft on the ground, 2 op losses. He lost 5 aircraft ops, 1 in by flak. So 6-2 or 6-3 aircraft lost. He lost 2 topsies, 2 Claudes. Interesting, 2 ops losses for Claudes. Those are sort of the obsolete Navy fighter that the Zero made obsolete. So he's still apparently using some of them. A Dina, a Babs. We lost a Dauntless and a Lodestar and a Blenheim. You know, not much to see there. Top pilots, we didn't even have any air-to-air engagements, I don't think, so nothing changed there. 1 pilot was KIA. Not on this list, but just 1 total pilot KIA. Yeah, so I mean, I don't really have a lot else to say. Did any ships get sunk last turn? I think there might have been a few. We lost 2 Australian troop transports near Auckland. He has a sub down there. And we lost a cargo ship near Suva. So we did lose some ships down in that general vicinity. I think actually it might not be a terrible idea to first disband them. Those guys are forming. Let's actually give these guys a destroyer escort so they're not unescorted from a anti-submarine perspective. I don't know if the La Trompe's any good at anti-submarine warfare. She does have depth charges. She's level 2 anti-sub. So we'll do that. And then do we have any aircraft that can operate anti-submarine patrols? No, they can't even reach there. All right, well, so much for that. Yeah, I really have basically no aircraft in New Zealand. New Zealand is actually kind of weak. I'd be worried if he tried to sneak a large fort. He'd need like a brigade, and that'd be a crazy ballsy move. I mean, he could do it, but I don't. There'd be no way for him to support that. Meanwhile, we'll set up a small anti-sub task force here of AMs and DD, or in a DD, and we'll have it operate at Auckland. No retirement. We'll max react 1. So we'll set 1 guy up here. Hopefully that'll help keep some of those ships safe in the south. And I think that's about it for our turn. So it's January 1st, 1942. We are a month into the war. We're into the 2nd year of the war. And that's the current situation right here. One other thing, look at airplane replacement pools in terms of what's actually in pool. I don't think we have much. We've got some Soviet aircraft. Actually, let's exclude the Soviets because they're not even in the war. In pool right now, we've got 38 Kingfishers, which are recon. We've got 27 Dauntlesses, actually. So that's useful, especially if if our bombers are going to start taking flak damage. A bunch of New Zealand Vincents. So those are the biplane. This is the New Zealand version of the Wildebeest. Some Catalinas, a good number of Dutch Catalinas, PBY5s. Sox Eagle 1, these are, again, spotter planes. Wait, these are SBD-3s, not SBD-2s? What's the difference between the 3 and the 2? 3's in production, the 2 isn't. SBD-3 Dauntless, SBD-2 Dauntless. What's the frickin' difference? 15 F4 F3A Wildcats. That's good. We really need more Wildcats. We're making 4 of them per month. Is that it? Yikes. I need more fighter aircraft to be able to cover my losses, so we'll have to see. Anyway, guys, that's probably not super exciting. We are building about 1 Air Cobra a day, and we've got 8 of those. We could always start changing some P-40 squadrons to Air Cobras. They're not good maneuverability-wise at high altitude, but they're actually pretty decent at low altitude, and they've got a decent air-to-ground capability as well. But yeah, guys, I think that's going to do it for the first turn of 1942. We'll have to look into something along the lines of, if we could put together like a podcast to kind of have a retrospective on some of the early operations of the war. I'd have to go back and refresh myself on some of those operations as well. But I know it's something that a lot of you have asked for. So we'll see how this plays out. We'll see if he's going to make his big stab. I mean, his save file was something about a big thing about to happen. And he's been teasing me with a whole bunch of memes and GIFs and whatever on Discord saying, like, he's about to make a huge move and this is a huge turn for him. So, I mean, to me, that's telling me he's probably going to make a swing south of his carriers, or he's got something else I haven't detected yet, which is certainly possible. He's caught us off guard a few times. I don't know why he's telling me these things, but hey, if he's going to give us free intelligence, that's good for us to know that something big will happen this turn. I'm guessing it's with these carriers because it's the only thing I really have intelligence on. We also know that we have intelligence on ship or troops headed toward New Caledonia. We've had multiple reports of fragments of regiments that are set up to go to Nomaya, which I don't know if it's strong enough to withstand any real serious attack. Probably not, but might bloody him at least, and maybe the coastal guns will give him a little bit of bloody nose. A little bit frustrated I haven't been able to get many of these guns ashore. Only 3 of the 6-inchers are ashore from this particular force. We've also got 3.7-inch. Well, actually, those are anti-aircraft guns. But in addition, we did get the bulk of the we did get the bulk of the light anti-aircraft battery ashore, so 36 Bofors, which should be useful against carrier aircraft. And then we also do have the New Caledonia detachment of French troops, which are mostly militia, which aren't great, but they do actually have 2 6-inch guns as well, coastal guns. They have some mortars and some 65mm guns and whatnot, so maybe we'll be able to kind of put up a little bit more of a respectable showing at Nomaya than people think. Our anti-aircraft is actually 13, which isn't, or artillery is 13. Flak is 8. How does that compare with Suva? Suva's flak is 10. How does that compare with Pearl? What's Pearl's flak rating? 95. So they're not quite a formidable arsenal yet, but it's better than nothing. Any aircraft, any pilot we kill now is one he won't have later. But anyway, guys, that's going to do it for this episode. I appreciate you tuning in for yet another episode, and we will see how things shape out in our next episode. Episode. Just keep saying that word. It's late. I'm a little punch drunk, and we'll see. Oh, one other thing. Guys, it's opening day across Major League Baseball. So it's a good day. It's the best day of the year. I'm a big baseball fan. So until next time, guys, this is the Historical Gamer saying thank you for watching, and I'm out.